Welcome back. I'm Doc Jen.
And I'm Dr. Dom.
And today for the Optimal Body Podcast, we're actually going to talk about the importance of warm-ups and cool-downs, what types of warm-ups and cool-downs you should be doing, and we're going to give some examples. Obviously, there's so many different types, and we're going to talk about why that might be, but we're going to give some examples of just ways that you can make it easy and start to think about it today to help your body. So stay tuned.
All right, getting into another pearl on warm-ups and cool-downs. And when should you warm up? What is a good warm-up to do? What's the benefit of cool-downs? I know that everyone gets done with their workout and wants to just run out of the gym and get on to the rest of their lives. And should we be cooling down? If so, what should we do?
I mean, this is a huge one, especially with warm-ups. I feel like over time, there's been so many different types that have become popular. You know, it's kind of like the cross the arm body. Like this is still what I think of like from elementary school. Put your arm behind the head,
Cross
maybe
the body,
do some windmills on the ground.
Your heel to your butt.
Jump rope or do some jumping jacks.
Or grab and do like leg swings
up
against, like do leg swings, butt kicks, high knees. And then we're good.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be.
When are specific warm-ups good? Are warm-ups important? I think that's an important one as well, because a lot of people, like you were saying with cool downs, I finished my workout and I'm going to go. Well, that's the same as warm-ups. I don't have time for a whole 30-minute warm-up, so I'm just going to go right into my thing. Or maybe even 5 minutes is something that people just want to bypass. I'm fine. I'm good. Let me just go into which... Let me be clear, I've been guilty of as well.
I think that both of us are. You just want to jump into the movement or the workout, and you don't want to take the time to do the warm-up or the cool-down. And so I think there was one word you said when you were talking just now. You said specific. When is it good to do a more specific warm-up? And I think you just said it because that's kind of normally how your mind thinks. Is you should always be trying to think specific to what the workout is. What is it that I'm doing? Am I going for a bike, for a run, heavy lifting?
HIIT workout.
And how can I then tailor both the warm-up and the cool-down to be a little more specific to that?
Now, there is a protocol that we found that we really like as we were kind of going through some of the research. It's called the RAMP protocol, RAMP. And we'll just break this down really generally so that you can kind of understand, this is what a warm-up really kind of entails, R being rise.
Yeah, and rise or raise is going to initially get that physiologic system going. It's going to elevate your heart rate a little bit, get the blood pumping throughout the system, like start to activate those muscles, just move all the junk around, right? And that's kind of that general portion of the warm-up that is good to include. And when we kind of dice into the research a little more, it always says, if you do movements that are more specific to the exercise that you're going to be doing, that's better than some sort of general warm-up like jumping jacks. Like you said earlier, I'm just going to do jumping jacks, butt kicks, arm cross, stretch or whatever, and I'm good. Like that's more of just general movements that are going to help rise the system. So that could be good as long as you follow it up with something more specific, which is the next part of the RISE protocol or RAMP protocol.
RAMP protocol. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I even remember in like physical therapy office, tell your patient to go on the bike for 5 minutes, then we'll get into the workout. Or the movements that are for physical therapy. And it's just kind of, so it's still part of that first part of the protocol, but then we don't touch on the other part, which the second part, the A being activation, right? So we're talking, okay, how do I start to address and prime the muscles that are going to be used for the movements that I'm going to do? So if I'm doing running, I don't really need to do cross body stretches in my upper arm. You're not really going to need that. So that's not specific at all to activate the muscles around the body.
But just talking about cross body stuff, when we run, we are always activating opposite arm with opposite leg going forward. So if you're doing some sort of core activation where you're pressing through one arm while you bring your left leg forward, like even standing on one leg, bringing your opposite leg into a 90 degree and then pressing forward against some sort of band or something, that's going to get that core activating the A in RAMP. So you're getting ready to activate that core with the cross movement of running. And then M, we move into mobility or mobilize.
Yeah. And that, again, if we're talking mobility, we're not talking stretching. And I think that's what's most
Not
important.
talking the just passive stretching.
Exactly. Mobility is the active portion of taking your body through a range of motion.
Yeah.
Which can be similar to activation, which can be similar to a body weight movement that you're going to be performing, right? That is mobility. So say I'm going to go into squats. Well, what is the mobility that is needed for squats? My hips need to be open. My ankles need to be open. So maybe I'm going to go into a full body squat, but I'm going to use a pole to hang on to so that I can kind of lean into my ankles and kind of go forward and kind of pull my knees open side to side. And I'm still holding on to something so that I make it a little easier for my body, but I'm dropping into that full mobility that's going to be needed. And I'm priming those areas and those joints to be ready to take on load.
Yeah. And that's going to help you both activate and mobilize your hips, your ankles, the actual joints you're using for that body weight squat. And then P is potentiate, which, is a fancy word for just continuing to increase the resistance that you might be using or increase the intensity of that warm up towards whatever the activity is. Again, so going towards squats, that's when maybe you'll add a little bit of weight, or maybe you'll grab a little exercise band and add it around the hips while you're doing that deep squat mobility exercise, because then you're going to potentiate, you're going to make your hips, those rotators in your hips, work a little bit more actively, upping that load to then be a lot more ready for the squat itself.
When we're talking about the benefits of, well, why even spend the time doing warm up? Hopefully, even just through that ramp protocol, you're able to see, okay, well, it kind of makes sense, right? I'm going to naturally start to increase that feedback from my brain into my body, which is known as our neuromuscular control and coordination, so that my body has more awareness, knows how to activate, and I'm preparing my body. We can never say that this movement 100% is going to reduce injury. We can't say that. However, we can say I'm just priming my brain to activate these muscles, to open up this range of motion, send some fluid and awareness into this area so that it is at least awake and doesn't get surprised when I suddenly put a load on my back and then do a heavy squat.
Yeah, those are always touchy subjects. Like, is doing a certain warm-up going to help prevent injury, or is doing a certain cool down going to help, reduce the amount of soreness that we have? Actually, we're coming out with a podcast soon on reducing soreness. If anybody has any studies out there that they know of that are like, hey, doing this warm-up can help, reduce injury or put you at lesser risk of injury, that would be great to know, because that's like the $1 million question. But we know that if we increase what those tendons are used to doing prior to going into that exercise and doing higher amounts of load on our knees, on our ankles, on our hips, they might be more prepared to not get injured or not go over that threshold, if we warm up correctly. During that rise phase, we're just doing so many different things to our system, like increasing our neuromuscular stimulation, increasing the proprioception around our joints, which is just kind of our joints' ability to sense where they're at in space, which is super important.
I mean, in general, like, our body is filled with fluids, and it's so incredibly important to that's when we start to feel tight. That's when we feel really achy or swollen, is when we're not getting those fluids moving. And there's a lot of aspects that obviously go into that: sleep, hydration, nutrients that we're getting in our body. If we're stressed, all of that does play a role in our fluid movement as well, but also just being able to warm up effectively, get that heart rate going, and then be able to do the movement specific to what we're going to be doing in the workout.
In talking about this ramp protocol, they don't necessarily all have their own specific exercise that's going to go with them. Like, what you do to rise your system up could be the same exact thing that you're doing, like the hinge exercise. You could use that for this whole warm up to get ready for a primarily, deadlifting based workout. But I also don't hate doing something, especially if you're doing like heavy leg lifting, like doing a light row machine for 2 minutes if you have something at your disposal, or this is a place you could jump rope, do line hops for just 30 times on each leg or both legs, side to side and front to back. That's going to get those hips working. That's going to get all the muscles in your legs working and pumping blood. Just a little something to start with, and then you could work into doing more specific movements like hip hinges, loading up the hip hinges steadily, and then jumping into your first set of deadlifts.
In general, when we're talking about, what are the studies really saying? There's 3 things specifically that they were saying, especially in terms of warm-ups, is that you want a more structured strategy to your warm-up. Getting rid of just those static stretches. Yes, still do a generalized something to get the blood pumping and your fluids moving. Sure, that heart rate up, but then do something a little bit more structured and specific to the workout that you're going to be doing.
And active warm-ups is, another huge one. I think both the last 2 are kind of active warm-ups and making sure that it gradually increases to the intensity of that workout.
They kind of gave a range, right? 10 to 15 minutes for that active warm-up, and then make sure that you don't have a huge break. So don't wait a long time. Oh, I'm going to do an active warm-up and then chat on the phone for 30 minutes.
Chat with my friend at the gym or something. Like then you lose all the benefit from that.
Yeah.
Maybe chat with your friend while you're doing your exercises.
Yeah.
That's like one of my biggest things when I see people at the gym and they're like, I was at the gym for 2.5 hours. I'm like, maybe doing work for like 15 or 20 minutes, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. And last little nugget I'm going to say is we've done podcast episodes on foam rolling, and we go over specifically when you should foam roll and how you should foam roll. So that's going to go a lot more specific, because I know a lot of people like to grab a foam roller either before or after workout. What is more effective? We go over all of that, and the massage guns. We go over that as well, because that is another big thing that people love to use either for a warm up and a cool down. And again, just go listen to those 2 podcasts. They're not very long, and they'll give you the specifics on those.
Totally. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Optimal Body Podcast. If you like what you heard, comment below, maybe subscribe, or come to us with other suggestions on what you want to hear, because all of these episodes are made specifically for you and what can help you in your own body. If you can, subscribe and leave a review to the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, and we will see you on future episodes of the Optimal Body Podcast.